Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 238, Networking for Introverts, a different perspective. Would it be too much of a stretch for you to believe that as an introvert you could learn to really enjoy networking? If you're already shuddering and feeling your pulse racing, take a deep breath and stay with me for the next 10 minutes or so whilst I explain how I learned to enjoy networking whilst still honouring my introvert nature. What I'm about to share might conflict with what you've heard from others, and that's absolutely okay. In fact, it's more than okay. Cage rattlers like me typically have a different message, and hearing something unusual from someone prepared to stand out from the crowd is where the catalyst for change often lives. I remember how I'd dither outside the door as my palms would sweat and my heart would beat a little too fast for my liking. I'd try to remember my 3-line introduction that I'd been encouraged to prepare, but sadly I'd find my mind empty of anything. I'd hope beyond all hopes that there would be someone inside the meeting room that I'd know and could gravitate to. But then my rational mind would kick in and I'd ask myself, what's the point of spending time here only talking to people I know? Thank goodness for that flash of rational thinking, because that set me on the path to making networking work for me. It was a timely reframe. It's never been truer that it's not what you know, it's who you know, as the tech geniuses in my team proved to me last week. I had a real problem with a particular payment platform the day before it was needed because I was speaking at a summit. Disaster. But not for long, as one of my team knew someone who worked at that organisation and actually had an email address, which typically got answered in a matter of moments. Not unusual, you may think, to have an email address, except this platform never gives out its email address and everything is done through a form on their website. And I've heard of some people waiting for over a week to get their issues resolved, having completed that form. Using the information my team member had meant we got the issue resolved in 90 minutes. Result. This was a clear case of knowing the right person to go to, or in my case, the right people. Now, if we as introverts continue to think that networking is a pain in the proverbial and therefore avoid it at all costs, how are we going to build our connections? Because that's what networking really is. It's not selling ourselves. That's such a last century approach to networking, and frankly, it's why it's got such a bad name. And of course, many extroverts love that type of networking, but if I'm honest, it's not for me and probably not for you. So you can relax now. But hang on then. What is networking? It's about building meaningful connections, the type of connections that typically we introverts really value. These are people with whom you can have a mutually beneficial business relationship rather than someone that you intend to do business with. So tip number 1, you don't network to get business, you network to build connections. It's relational, not transactional. One of the big myths, alongside small talk and selling yourself, is that networking was about collecting or exchanging business cards. It's really not, because they either got squirreled away never to see the light of day, or thrown in a bin. So actually, it never was about collecting or exchanging business cards unless you saw them as some kind of trophy. And some did. The number they had collected or dished out was a measure of success to some people. And let's just finish that thought for a moment. Who on earth has business cards anymore anyway? Welcome to the 2020s, my friends. Now, because networking is relational, about building connections, you need to engage with that individual in meaningful ways once the connection is made. One of the things I do for my connections is that when I see something I know that they're interested in, I forward it to them with a simple "saw this and thought of you" message. Most recently, I sent a senior partner in a professional services firm an article on multi-generational working. From our previous conversations, I know that this is something he's very interested in. In fact, he's engaged a reverse mentor who is much younger than him to help him with his thinking on this topic. I also know that he is so busy that he's unlikely to spot these nuggets of useful information for himself. So that's where I can continue to add value to our relationship. And it took me, 90 seconds to compile an email and attach the article? I call that a good use of my time. More than that, it sends a powerful message to my connection that I continue to be mindful of his interests. That's a win-win, I'd say. So tip number 2 is to remember what issues and interests your connections have, and when you see something, send it on. It's like paying it forward. Now back to my previous nerve-wracking experiences outside the meeting room. Another myth is that networking only happens in these artificially arranged, overly formal breakfast or evening events. Thankfully, this is also a last century relic that we can confine to the history books. If we change how we think of networking to be about making meaningful connections, that can happen anywhere, online or in person, at work or socially. The big shift and increase in comfort levels for me has come as a result of not thinking about I need to attend an event to meet people, but when I'm with people, how can I connect better with them? So it's kind of switching things around for me, and it's taken the pressure off. But if I do still choose to attend an arranged networking event, which I rarely do, it is with a specific purpose or objective in mind. And once I've met my objective, I give myself permission to skedaddle, to hightail it out of there and to make my way home. Those formal events are not for lurking in. Most of my meaningful connections are formed through introductions from existing clients or people I meet when I'm attending a training course or seminar, or from when I'm speaking at an event. Let me give you a couple of examples. Just last week I was speaking at an online summit, and one of my fellow speakers made a beeline for my breakout room and said, "I so wanted to learn more from you." What a beautiful start to a connection. Also last week, I was contacted by someone I met nearly a year ago at a business mastermind, and we'd chatted virtually several times since. She invited me to be a panellist for a prestigious Future Leaders event about personal brand, as she knew that many of them would benefit from my perspective as an introvert. So tip number 3, it's not what you know, it's who you know and how you know them. I want to leave you with a reminder that in order to be effective networkers, and of course I'm using that term loosely now, the more you can be your authentic self, the easier and more enjoyable you'll find making those connections. So let me share 5 points with you. Number 1, the biggie is to shift your focus so that it becomes one of making the most of opportunities to network and make connections in daily life, rather than thinking you have to attend networking events. But if you are attending an event or a conference where there are organised networking opportunities, pre-charge, prepare, and be purposeful. And then recharge afterwards, of course. Number 2, get over the small talk hang-up. As I've said many times, small talk is a gateway interaction that opens the door to meaningful conversations. So get over yourself and get out of your own way. The more you tell yourself you hate small talk, the more you will hate it. Number 3, have a few questions lined up that invite others to talk about themselves and in the direction that you want to take the conversation. Rather than, how was your journey? Blech. How about, what impact is the new influx of Gen Z apprentices having on your workplace practices? Okay, that's something I'm interested in, but you get the idea. Get the conversation to meaningful as fast as possible. Oh, and do have your own answer lined up for any questions you ask, because it may well come back at you. Number 4, use your advanced and finely tuned listening skills to great effect. Do you know how many so-called conversations are actually 2 monologues missing each other? Listening and asking relevant follow-on questions will have you stand out from the crowd, and in a good way. That's how you'll pick up those tidbits of information that allow you to add value even in small ways, like saw this and thought of you, which serves to build relationships. 5th and finally, remember that around half of any population identify as introverts, so other quieter, thoughtful types will probably welcome getting into a meaningful conversation with you. And because we are everywhere and at all levels in organisations, your fellow introverts may just be the ones who are able to make a difference when you need it most. Just like my genius team member. So, how am I doing? Have I managed to shift your perspective yet? I guess we'll only know when you put this into practice. So have fun, get out of your own way, and invite new connections. Which reminds me, have you connected with me on LinkedIn yet? If not, do it today and let me know it's because you listened to this episode. Making connections on LinkedIn is a brilliant form of networking, and one that aligns more readily with our introverted sensibilities. Connect with people with the intention of being curious and finding out more about them over time. On that platform, it's a case of who you know and who they know. Beware though, there are those who will try to sell to you the moment you connect. They are the desperate hustlers who only see people as a number, and I get great joy in deleting those who do that. I'm interested in making and building real connections. So be discerning and send me, Joanna Rawbone, an invite to connect. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.